All right, so call to order at 12:05. Do we have any citizen comments?
No.
Nope. So on to our first discussion item with Public Works Director Dustin Johnson on the engineering development code updates.
Yeah, it says you're sharing it.
Oh.
Yeah, see it? We need to have that door open, right?
Yeah, there's have that.
I'm sorry, gal, because it's a public meeting. We have to have the door open.
It's a public meeting, so we have to have the door open. Sorry.
Well, I don't understand. It's not like it's law.
No, but I guess.
I think it could give the
I
impression.
should give an impression. There you go. Right there.
All right. So this is well, it is the same PowerPoint presentation I gave to, oh wait, we're already too many slides up.
It's probably my fault.
I gave to the city council at a work session last week, the week before, and so so I'll go through the plan. Actually, I'll tell you why I'm here. As you all are sure aware, if you've ever been on social media, City of Lewiston is the hardest city to deal with for development in the world. And so this is our effort to streamline some of the requirements for development within the city, while at the same time making sure that the users of the facilities, yes, Mark.
I didn't mean to interrupt the middle of the sentence. I just want to be clear. Were you being serious or were
No,
you being
I
sarcastic?
was being completely sarcastic, that much of the requirements that we administer are federal or state requirements for frontage improvements or water and sewer improvements. So it doesn't matter if you're developing in Lewiston or you develop in Coeur d'Alene or Alabama, you have the same requirements generally.
Well, first of all, I think all of us hear that complaint all the time and have for at least
Yep.
20 years.
Yep, yeah, it's not
It
new.
is widespread.
Yep.
And I wouldn't want that comment to go into the minutes. And
Sorry.
if it were a statement of fact.
Yeah, no.
Hardest in the world.
In the world, no, I was kind of trying to be a little lighthearted in that, I hear it myself every day, and being somebody who leads the charge in public works, that I kind of now take it not very serious, because most people, when you say, give me a specific example, they don't have an example. And oftentimes you find an example, it's like, I don't control the requirements for drinking water standards that you have to abide by. So no, that is not true. We are no different, and I've worked in other jurisdictions. And in fact, I find that Lewiston's development standards are actually a little lax, little, laissez-faire, Wild West. So no, we are not the hardest. We are probably actually on the easier side. Where we can improve, I think, is communication and the transparency of what the standards and expectations are when people come through the door, which is, I guess, why I'm here today, to talk about what those requirements are, some of the way the code is written currently, and the ways that we'd like to modify them with some feedback from some of our advisory boards, in ways that we can make it, like I said, compliant with federal and state standards, while at the same time giving some flexibility in development for the developers in here, so City of Lewiston can prosper and move forward. And so generally, like I've already said, why we're here, I want to take two different guiding documents that we have adopted. One is the ADA transition plan, which this body had a large role in pushing through about almost 5 years ago now. And then kind of what the code says. And so a lot of times in my world, when we're talking about private development, I'm getting people pushing up against me to say, I don't think we need to build that ADA ramp. I don't think we need to build compliant sidewalk, or trying to find a way out of it, and I'll give some examples where I may agree with them. And so the more flexibility I feel like you provide staff, and I'm not saying extreme flexibility, but where you give staff, the applicant, and even ultimately the council some tools in which we can implement what we want for development, it benefits everybody. If we require a sidewalk where there's no sidewalk within 5 miles, it's gonna cost the developer more money, and the users aren't actually gonna get any use out of it. So there's some ways that we'd like to get that streamlined. So as I already said, city council and our our centerfold here, Eric's on the front cover of the ADA transition plan there. This goes back, and I would say, you know, there's some members here that were on the board at the time that pushed this through. This was a long, maybe painful process. Eric can provide a little bit more context than I can. I started in July of 2020, and so I carried it to the adoption, but obviously if I started in July, adopted in September, I wasn't really part of the creation of it. But the ADA transition plan, and this is just taken right out of the plan. It identifies the obstacles, what we're trying to overcome. It kind of a roadmap of what we're trying to accomplish, estimates. It, you know, just basically try to get input, how we're going to do it. One of the requirements is we provide an annual update. It's taken to this board and then adopted by the council. And we actually just did it, you know, now we're almost through 24. We just adopted the 2023 plan. But that's a whole different conversation. One thing that was identified in the plan was priority routes. And so you recognize these are the routes, corridors that they said as a high priority. And I think anybody who lives in the valley knows these streets. Dryden, Thane, Main, D, Southway, 11th, Warner. These are all either commercial corridors or corridors like Warner that connects neighborhoods to commercial corridors or schools. You know, so none of these streets should be a surprise as to why they're important. So now that is the plan that's set forth by federal law that we are going to incorporate, and the plan itself leaves a lot of the incorporation details up to us. Now I'm going to flip the page and talk about what the municipal code actually says. Specifically, chapter 31 is public right of way. And so that is where my department of public works lives. So everything property line to property line. So you will see, and specifically today, I'm going to talk about section 31-46 through 31-52. And that identifies the responsibilities for frontage improvements, maintenance, the actual details of what there is. And this is another picture taken from the ADA transition plan. So a lot of people don't realize that the sidewalk is the responsibility of the property owner. So if the sidewalk falls apart, or you know, the tree roots typically push it up and the sidewalk's no longer compliant, it is the responsibility of the property owner to maintain and replace any deficient panels, or if there's snow on it, they got to shovel it. And it is still in the right of way. And so I do get a lot of questions and a lot of comments that if it's in the right of way, why does the city not maintain it? And I can tell you it's a liability issue. It's a cost of business. It is not just Lewiston. Every municipality, every government agency I've ever been a part of or worked with, this is a standard procedure. So this is not unique to Lewiston. So the everything from back of curb to the property line is the responsibility of the property owner. And that's not what we're here to talk about. So what we are here to talk about, and this is where this group played a large role providing input, which actually was never actually adopted. And this was talking about new development and new construction. What triggers new construction? So an example would be the Sherry's up on 21st Street, or that's First Grade, or right there at the change there. Sherry's has gone out of business. Now Denny's is moving in. And so there is a certain amount of construction they're going to do to swap out all the Sherry stuff and bring in Denny's. The question is, what point would that trigger ADA improvements? And in the past, it was a dollar amount percentage based off of the assessed value, appraised value of the property. I don't like that method. I'm not saying I don't have a better method, but in practicality, what has happened, it's amazing how people will look at that, look at the cost of the improvements, look at where the number triggers the improvements and say, is it 50%? Is it 60%? Well, it's funny because I got 49%, so I don't have to do the improvement. So they always find a way to just get under that threshold. So I'll talk a little bit more detail on that. Are there any exceptions? So yes, in the code, there is one exception really that's clear cut, and it's fee in lieu of sidewalks. The example I gave earlier about 5 miles in the middle of nowhere, you're a local street, you can pay fee in lieu of sidewalk. And the intent of the program is you're doing some improvements. In your lifetime, there's never going to be any sidewalk there. You pay a fee, we record it, we document that you have paid your share of sidewalk, And we're gonna take that money and we're gonna invest it in front of a school in one of those corridors that we've identified for the ADA transition plan. And so the city gets benefit in that we get to take the investment and put it somewhere where it's more necessary. The homeowner or developer gets benefit because they don't actually have to, they're now done. They've done their share and they've moved on. The problem with the fee in lieu is the way the code is written, it says the property cannot be located on an arterial. It cannot be located in this and. So there's like 6 ands in there. And so the practicality of using the FILO is very difficult because attorneys look at this and say, well, they don't meet this criteria. So they're not, FILO doesn't apply to this application. And so we've had problems where we want to use FILO. It looks like it's a good idea. They just don't meet, they don't meet the full, all of the ands in the code.
If they don't meet FILO, do they then require to build the sidewalk?
That's where we've had that's the yes. And the answer is yes, by code. And we've,
Don't you have the power to grant a postponement?
in certain situations, yeah,
Not a waiver.
not a
Not
waiver.
a waiver.
Yeah, so and postponements have been becoming a little bit more useful, but the code doesn't actually give us the latitude in there. So yeah, you guys have been here long enough to know that there is a postponement, which I'll talk about
It was
too.
not an issue. It was in front of Planning and Zoning Commission. anyway.
Okay, yeah.
But I want to,
And I just want to clarify, so even if the landowner wants to do a FILO, the city can't let them do a FILO because of the ends.
Yep.
So the simple fix, of course, with politics, is to simply change the and to the or.
Well, now I'm done. That's my presentation, actually.
well, just to follow this out through, if they pay a FILO, that relieves them or really relieves the property of having to build a sidewalk.
Mhm.
And you made the comment, not within your lifetime. So even when the day comes that the city wants a sidewalk there, the city will have to pay for it.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Can the property, a subsequent property owner say, you know what, we would like a sidewalk in front because it would give our property a more finished look? Can they request that the city put in the sidewalk?
I don't know. I mean, they can put it in, but I don't know that.
Yeah, but then they're paying twice.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
Exactly. I don't,
Do they have any leverage over the city to say, okay, now we want the sidewalk, you put it in?
yeah, I don't think they would have the leverage to have the city put it in without any other development. Like, if they came to us and said that the entire street has said, we want to do this. We'll do a local improvement district, an LID. So each property is gonna pay it. Oh, and this person here has already paid FILO, then the city could consider that, do it. So I'm gonna just whip through these real quickly. I've got a half a dozen examples.
I hate to do this, but I got short-term memory issues, so hopefully I haven't forgotten it just saying this. You've got the ADA, you've got Department of Transportation. You've got regulations and you have guidelines. Department of Transportation, as I understand it, there's a lot of guidelines currently because they haven't finalized a lot of regs.
Yep.
And that would affect this area here we're talking about with the DOT, with the buses and stuff like that.
That I mean, because that's a deeper question, because the DOT right now, I mean, one, ITD is, and you probably know, a bit behind as far as the transition plan. And then you have state routes versus local routes. And so the state routes would be true on that, whereas the local routes, I don't think that's the case. So this is an example of a development that came in. So no sidewalk anywhere on this side of Thane. I believe there's sidewalk on this, maybe there isn't anything.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
An owner, so the roundabout, the Towers roundabout is up here, just like a half a block.
Is it?
I believe.
I think it's at the bottom.
Is it, yeah, you're right.
Because that's
this is the pole,
14, yeah.
So
No sidewalk.
no
on that
sidewalk,
side.
not on this side, and no sidewalk on this, Alder. Somebody came in and said, and it's obviously not being used for anything now. They said, hey, can I put a billboard reader sign up there? And we typically look at this and say, well, is the intensification of the use? Are you gonna have cars coming and going? The answer is no. Is it building improvement, and it's not really a building, so, but the way the code reads is how do we interpret this? And so the one question which this has come up to me multiple times is my answer to the question is always a question, which is, if not now, then when? Because one thing where you're saying, well, you gotta put sidewalk in, well, that billboard now becomes completely, it's not feasible to put that in. The inverse of that is they put the billboard in, it's very successful, it's there for 30 years. The only way the sidewalk would ever be built is if the city actually built it. And so that would be putting it on the back of the profit taxpayers. So this is one of my favorites. This is Hatway Road. So this is North Lewiston. You can see the grade going up 95, 12, well, the other portion of 95 down here. This is the perspective. This is more of a rural standard road. They talk, it's covered here, but this talking about redevelopment. The picture doesn't do it justice, but you can see this is a cliff right there. And so by our code, I can't issue FILO because of the
Because it's an
classification of the
arterial.
road. Yeah. And there's nothing in the code that says due to topography, you're up against the river, you're up against the cliff or wetlands or something. There's nothing in there. So this seems like a good example where you just add a line that says director or even the city council could grant an exemption because this just isn't, it doesn't match. You could still get like a deferment for future, for whatever reason, if this was, we wanted to do an LID. So it would bind possibly future property owners, but this would be handled more than likely with a much larger project. Another one, this is Richardson out here, so kind of on the edge of Tammany. All these properties up here, with any improvement would be required to build Richardson. And you can see this massive gully. This would be one where we would say a postponement or even a development agreement where we say nobody's getting any use and it kills any potential project of this. And this is another one on Thane. There's actually sidewalk along Thane for this property. This is Cantor's, and this has been a long-standing issue where if they want to do any improvements to this area or put another building here and say, I don't want to use any access off of this, but once you do any improvements off of these businesses, you're going to trigger frontage improvements on Airway and what is this, 11th, right here. And so these two frontages have killed any investment in these projects unless it was below the threshold for what would be considered new construction. This is Bar Road. This was the property. I forgot the name of this road. It's not really a road right here. It's not improved, but same deal. This long stretch, there's no sidewalk on any of these on these frontages. So code would require frontage just for this, and it doesn't go anywhere. Again, if you did a postponement, the other option would be a development agreement where they would sign and say, a postponement would be more likely, where you say, we will participate when this, maybe it is an LID in 40 years and we have a school or a local shopping center down here or something, I don't know. And these properties would participate in a future date when it was more appropriate. It's kind of the same thing. You could address this with subdivision where you weren't on the hook. So if you put a little building right here next to the school, you trigger all these frontage improvements. You could bypass that by carving out and do a subdivision, but that just is more money that you're sinking in there. So again, postponement or development agreement. This is up on Powers in 20, this is actually 22nd. Same deal. Guy bought the property, wants to fix it up, put a house there. Now we're just looking at, there's no frontage improvements on 22nd. There's no frontage improvements on Powers. It's Powers, he's not eligible for FILO. He could do a deferment where at the time, because this is Greco development so they have improvements on this side, just not on that side. So, I don't think it was in the packet. I did not provide you our draft. I'll send you code. We'll make sure you guys have the draft code amendments that we've worked up to date. This is just an introduction today to kind of talk about and get feedback from you. Our intent is to clarify some of the ambiguous language, and Eric's already caught on. We changed the ands to ors. We'd like to update the FILO, and better define the postponements and the development agreements. A postponement would be, the intent where we look at it and say, this is gonna be part of a bigger package that could be an LID. A development agreement would be where it's a larger parcel and somebody says, I'm just gonna put a building here and then I'll do these for, oh, good example for a development agreement would be Boys and Girls Club. They got kind of ran through the ringer, but if they said, we're gonna redevelop this wing on this year, and then once we get the capital, we'll do this wing and then we'll do these frontages. And so we just enter in a development agreement so the city can execute and the developer does not get off the hook.
Just in my ongoing battle against acronym, did you tell people what an LID is?
I think, I mean, yes, local improvement,
Okay, I wasn't sure
district,
if they're not, just for that.
local improvement district. So that traditionally is how a lot of towns like Lewiston built the original city streets was, neighbors up in, Normal Hill would say, hey, I'm tired of muddy streets with no drainage. And so the neighborhood would come solicit to the city. And that's all these old resolutions from the early 1900s say, I want the city to build a street. And so you can charge me over a time, you pay it back over 10, 15, 20 years. And those are very popular up until we started getting money from the feds. So they're not as popular anymore, but I don't know the last time that we did an LID. But they are available and they are very successful where you can say, and it doesn't mean a developer can participate or the city can participate. Say the city's gonna say, it's a $4 million job, the city's gonna front 2 million as part of it because it's gonna be part of, water, sewer and other improvements. The local neighbors, will participate in it. Obviously, you don't like your property taxes, you feel like that's what should be going to fix the roads, you're not gonna be a fan of LIDs, which is why they've kind of died off. So, but that is a avenue. So, we're looking at clarifying the code. I will get you the copies of our current draft for you guys to look at. It's dry, it's code. But just kind of an introduction today of what we're looking to do. Yeah.
Okay. I hate to be that guy, but I would be remiss to not bring it up at least one more time. Some of this was already covered through a subcommittee. Mike and I served on that. We were the representatives from this commission at least 5 years ago because it was pre-COVID.
More than that.
5 or 6 years ago. Well, this committee doesn't exist that far back. 5 or 6 years ago, with representatives from the Transportation Committee, which doesn't exist anymore. You weren't here. I don't know if you were here. Public or Community Development has had staff turnover, but we spent a considerable amount of time. We had multiple meetings. We had to fight it out among ourselves because there was such a variety of opinion. Cantor's Inn was one of the hallmark pieces of property we were using as, here's a problem here, how do we fix it? And we came up with a good formula. It wasn't what you and I wanted, but it was close enough.
And was that the percentage?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's all we were ever told. It went to the city council once or twice.
Yeah.
They didn't adopt it, but they didn't reject it. And every time we asked about it for a year or two, oh, it's still under consideration. Oh, it's still being reworked. And it was an insult to all the time that we and the other citizens put into it, that the city council never acted on it or never even gave an answer as to what, all of the problems you identified here
Mhm.
were identified 5, 6 years ago. We came up with a solution. What happened? Did you ever find it?
I found, so it was on Sean Stuber's desk.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and I remember looking at that.
Okay, we came up with something different than the 50% formula.
And it was
We had different
an
options.
implementation schedule, I remember, because it started out at a certain percent and then it worked its way in.
So anyway, that's,
I think we made a recommendation.
Sure, but I
Yeah.
mean, if the city council, and of course, most of the city council, all of the city council, they're gone, city
Well,
manager's
Kleber,
gone.
because when I presented to this
Oh.
council, Kleber did remember that. And he
Okay.
brought, because I was like, I don't remember the percent. And he knew exactly what the percent was that they adopted, which is still in place.
Oh, yay for Tim.
And, but then there was a stepped up scale that it was gonna be more, not restrictive, but more.
Well, I would, if there was a concrete objection by the council, it would have been nice to know what it was.
Mhm.
And if you feel, I won't ever bring it up again, if you feel that you're moving forward with a better solution than what a committee of citizens hammered out.
I will go back and see if I can find that, because I remember seeing, I mean, I know it's in the files, I can find that. And from my recollection, and I may be wrong because I wasn't on the committee and it's now been 5 or 6 years, but my issue with that was all based off of, construction estimates and percentage of assessed value, and then you came up with that number. What we ended up in practicality was the staff, which is civil engineers, telling somebody, I don't believe your assessment, or I don't believe your, and then they could, the applicant, and that's their right to do it. They would modify their numbers or say, well, I'm not gonna touch the kitchen then, even though they'll do that with a future application. And so what I have worked with community development and building now is using the uniform building code. Uniform building code is the international building code, that they have tiers of construction. So tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And once you hit, I think it's tier 3, which is, it's clearly defined that, it's going to the studs. I'm speaking out of turn. I'm not sure. I'm not a building person, but it is a defined tier of construction. So if you're replacing windows, you're not going to trigger it. And it doesn't matter if you had a giant building with a lot of windows and you're not actually doing any change of use, you're just changing windows, you would never trigger it. But if you're, a restaurant and you're changing it dramatically, it's gonna be a hospital and you're gonna raise the top on it, yeah, that's gonna trigger improvements. And we don't have to argue what the assessed value is or what the construction costs were. And that's something I think you deserve an explanation as to why, I mean,
Yeah, but no one's around.
I know, and that's the thing is,
Unless
change.
Jim Cleaver remembers. And the one other thing I'll say is, based on your presentation, I don't remember that there were restrictions on Philo. That you can't offer Philo if they're on an arterial, if this. I thought Philo, I mean, I wonder if that's been a change in the last 5, 6 years. I thought it was optional based on the discretion of the city staff for good reason.
And that's the way it was implemented before I got here, because Sean Stubers was implementing it much that way. And then it's Jana Gomez, and I'm not throwing her under the bus, but she said, did you read this? It says, and so, and about 2020 was when it flipped from, we can use it a little bit more liberally to, no, it's gotta meet all of these
Okay,
criteria.
that was never presented.
No, it makes sense. I mean, no, but I don't recall on the fee in lieu, whether budgetarily, those fee in lieus are assigned to a sidewalk curb cut issue. They can't be used for something else.
Yes, Philo is, and it's interesting, and it's a bear to administer, but the city's broken, it breaks the city into zones generally. And the money I don't even know, it has to be, I think the code says, in the area of where it was collected. And that's kind of a loose interpretation, and what's funny is it goes into a single pot, and so it's a nightmare to administer because we look at, all right, where and most of the stuff that we collect for Philo is in generally the same areas. And so that makes it easy, but when it's like, now I'm looking for, and it expires, the money technically expires, I think, after 2 or 3 years. And so you're collecting it here, so you have to know where it came from. You're looking for a project to spend it on, and then you got a timeline that you got to spend it. So
Okay,
That seems like a political way to have something there that's an unnecessary provision and probably should be struck as part of this process.
I think
I didn't know it expired. I didn't know it had to be.
Yeah,
used
we were
in the
never
same-
told it
In the
expired.
same neighborhood. But what we were told was the Philo fund was extremely valuable to use as matching funds
Yep.
for federal grant. That we have this money on account, we could use it Because matching funds, even if that federal project was clear on the other side of town,
Yeah.
we were never told it had to be
Yeah.
close to the neighborhood.
And that's been, I mean, and that's exactly it. That's, we use Philo because we use it for safe routes to school. We take that Philo, we can help, into the school, sidewalk improvements to get to school zones or whatever else. So, yeah, we do use it for that match. And then a lot of times we'll use it for, a development is being on a site, and it's, from here to the back of the wall where it doesn't match up grade wise to an existing site, so we'll just finish that project out for them since it's not
Well,
there.
it's obvious our information is old. From way back.
Well,
No, it seems like, if it expires, then it makes it much easier for a property owner to just kind of wait it out, wait out.
yeah,
Expiration.
and really, once somebody pays it, obviously they're done. And so I don't know that anybody's actually holding the city's feet to the fire on it. But, we administer the code and that's our goal, is to not get sued, but it's just one of those loopholes that
What happens to the money after it's been expired?
it's nothing. Nobody's challenged it to this date, though. There's no enforcement on it. It's it's like Eric's saying, it was a policy that we created. And somebody could challenge, somebody, a lot, Dan Young pays a lot of this stuff for some of his developments. And if somebody had the time to come in and truth out all the books, I'm not saying, we do our best to administer it, but when the code says in the area, what's, quarter mile, half mile, and it's good, and the money goes towards, matching for grants or fixing the system. We don't, because when it comes in, we put it in the Philo fund. We track the projects that we have received it from, but we don't track it into the zones.
Sounds like the language just needs to be changed to
Yeah.
be more receptive to that use.
Yeah, so this is, like I said, the introduction to this group. I want to speak to the Public Works Advisory Committee, but between the city council and the Public Works Advisory Committee, I think their effort is more of, their task is more of streamlining the code, making it easier to develop, and being clear, where I think this group is a little bit more receptive to who are the end users, who are we trying to protect, so.
Is that a standing commission?
Public Works Advisory,
Oh, I've never heard of it.
they're newish. Yeah, they were created and then we couldn't fill it, and now they've been meeting for a year or so, or maybe a year, more than a year now, a year and a half. So, like I said, I will get you guys the code language. This has already been really good. Kind of the history and some of these things about the Philo details is valuable to me. And
Cantor's was a very good, and I've never stepped in that part, but it was a very good example.
we could do some research.
And relevant to ours, because I believe their proposal for improvement was to have handicap accessible bathrooms.
Yep.
And they couldn't move forward with the project because they couldn't afford
Well, and that's,
all of that linear feet of sidewalk
Yep.
they'd have to put in. And so a project we would want to support and encourage was thwarted administratively because of all.
so we have our own, I can't remember, I got all these acronyms in my head, but development staff meets weekly. And we actually brought up some of those things in one of the proposals, which I think is getting stricken out, but basically saying, if you're triggering ADA improvements, then you gotta do frontage improvements. And that, we caught ourselves of like, well, now you're kind of undermining, we wanna make our bathrooms compliant, but now you've cost us out to do the actual public infrastructure, so.
Because bathrooms are remodeling is super expensive
Yeah.
in perhaps a building that doesn't have a large.
I have stepped in that place and those bathrooms definitely could use some help.
We'll come testify.
So I don't think we need to cover everything today, but I wanted to let you guys know what we're working on. There's other improvements. We're working on the subdivision code. I don't know if that's gonna trigger anything for you guys, but we're doing other development code updates. And so this is the first one out of the gate. I will come back to you guys probably in February or March, once I've talked to the Public Works Advisory Committee and kind of have more things firm. what I have found as we're working through all the code is we start going down and we're saying, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? I just kind of want to circle a date on the calendar and say, let's say April 1st, whatever we've got done, we're gonna take it to the council and adopt it. No, we'll probably come back in another year, and do those things. But I want to make sure that you guys are, it doesn't happen what happened before, Mark, where we don't get, it lingers. And so that's my strategy was to take it to council. They gave me the verbal thumbs up. I want to include you guys. It's gonna take a couple months because the boards only meet once a month, but then get it in front of council and then see what happens.
That's
Thank
great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dustin. In the interest of time, how do we feel about moving discussion item B to next meeting? Because there is something on the active agenda that is time sensitive.
It's Dustin need to be here for that,
What?
the letter of
No,
support.
it's coming from the grant manager.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor or any discussion, I suppose? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, do we have a system update on the optimize public reporting?
Yes, I'm gonna talk on that. So this was something that you guys had requested to be on the agenda monthly until we can get it active. But this is that optimized citizen reporting thing that we want to do on the website. So after our meeting last month, I went on to the Washington DC reporting system that Eric uses and is commented on. And I was able to pull all of the options that a person could report on. And then kind of narrow that down into ones that maybe are more specific to City of Lewiston. Because obviously Washington DC is gonna be much bigger and have different types of services, right? And I talked to information systems and security. And they said, yes, that's something that they could do. So it doesn't point out ADA specifically, but you can still track it, like sidewalks would be ADA improvements. You know, other things in here where you could still track it and still include that as something in our annual transition report or. You know what I'm talking, yeah, the report. And so their timeline, they're really, really heavily project right now. And so they do think they can provide it a little more attention come January or towards the first of the year. And so ideally, I think what they'll do is try to come up with a list. And so just some examples, you guys would be like, if somebody wanted to report a transit issue or a sidewalk issue, you could even report an abandoned bicycle or, you know, a dead animal, or if a park maintenance needed something, or, even, you can even report like if your garbage pickup was missed, or, you know, a parking issue, or a roadway repair, or a pothole. So those are the type of things that a person could select and then message to the city. So the actual creation of it is not that difficult. I was talking to Eric about it. What's difficult then is all of those things go to different people within the city. So you then have to set up the workflow to go to specific people. So then we would need to work with the departments to say, okay, who's gonna receive parking tickets? Who's gonna receive, you know, what type of things would go to our code enforcement, or what type of things would go to HR or streets. So that's gonna be the real kind of process that's gonna take a little bit more time, and that will take the city collectively to come together to figure out. So that's kind of the update, yeah.
Yeah, the one thing this also lends to is the accountability. Whoever gets assigned these tasks, they really literally almost have to respond in some way. And if it has stopped somewhere, you know right where it's paused. And so it's extremely useful for just having basically almost like a to-do list where you're actually communicating to. And the communication time is often just automatic, but then doing a response of some sort. So the accountability issue is a big deal.
Yeah, and some of these things kind of already have their own process, so, but the city could consider whether they want to move to a new process. I mean, one of the things Eric and I were talking about was like a building inspection request. You know, community development has their own process. So I'll bring this up to them to say, would this be something you would want to incorporate into your process? Or is that something that we just won't have listed as something
Yeah,
that they
and
could?
the advantage here
Mhm.
is it's not a real-time communication process. So you phone somebody, they're not there. Well, you gotta send them an email, you gotta do whatever. Well, this just actually sends them that, and it's actually automatically added in. It's just a better way of functional communication.
Yeah, and there'll be some people who just don't like the technology component of it, and they could still come in and they could still talk to
Sure.
somebody, you know, but then at least this would give people another option. You know, or even people who don't have the ability to get to city hall or get to community development, so. So yeah, that's really the kind of the update on it. If you guys have any feedback on that, you can let me know, but otherwise that's kind of the direction I'm headed.
That's great.
Okay. Short and sweet.
Wonderful. So onto our active agenda. Do we want to discuss commission goals today?
This might be something, since it ties into the review of the code,
Right.
if you want to put it on next month's meeting too.
I would move to put it on next week's. Or next
I would-
month.
I would second the chair's motion.
Right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. So letter of support for grants, we received a request from Melinda Rose, is that her name?
Yeah, Melinda, yeah, she's the city's grant manager.
Yes, and they are looking for a letter of support for the Bryden Avenue reconstruction.
I did bring copies of the letter that are stapled to the agenda, so like, I don't mark if you wanna grab one of those stapled agendas, then you guys could actually just read the letter. Constance, I just kind of modified it, put it in your name since it was a template.
Oh, great.
But yeah, it would be to, complete the Brighton Avenue reconstruction project. Yeah, and the amendment to the agenda was to add this, just so you guys know, because it couldn't wait till next month, so that's what we added.
She sent that email right in the nick of time.
Yeah. I really did, because if it had waited today, Constance, you would have had to make a motion to add it to the agenda, I think.
Hey, people, what do you know about this raise program?
I know nothing.
I know about that one, I know about Brian 1 and 2.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Melinda, that's what she's looking for, is grants that will help the city and community to try to, support projects, you know.
Offset some of the costs.
Yeah.
Anybody have any thoughts or feelings?
Eric Peterson.
Eric?
Yeah, Brighton 1 and 2 are pretty important in this whole development of the major arterial ways and everything. Right now, as for this commission, we have no sidewalks to speak of on Brighton, even though it's a major arterial. We do have sidewalks on most of Durrell, I think it is, except for like maybe 3 blocks on one side. From the perspective of the DAC, it's like completely completing a very important arterial route. It's also commercially important. Everything stated in this letter is 100% right, and it's a big deal for the orchards, just in future development, future businesses, etc. Anyone who's got property around Brighton would be lucky to have it in the future, if we actually get growth here. I'd recommend that we just go ahead and sign this letter and send it. And future support for anything on the, like, Brighton 2. I don't know how long it will take, but it's basically halfway between Fifth Street and Thane is Brighton 1, and then I think the rest of it is Brighton 2. I have driven my wheelchair along all of Brighton. I will say it's an interesting experience.
Sounds dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, even like the street's not well lit. I almost hit somebody that was walking down the side of the road on Brighton
Yeah.
last night, and it was kind of terrifying.
Did somebody on a bicycle that was dressed darkly with no reflectors.
Yeah, you have to be, I am, if you see me, I've got one short one. I have to be extremely brilliant, reflective and whatever else, and drive extremely defensively to avoid not being killed. And Brighton would be a #1 place to get killed.
I hate outside of UPS where
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
driveway.
Yeah.
You're just pulling in and out
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah.
Just as a comment, one of the interesting roads to cross is at the top of Brighton grade to go from the airport area to the road to go down Brighton pathway.
You mean
And-
a left turn there?
Actually, no, in a wheelchair.
Oh,
So using pedestrian rights, and thank you for clarifying that, Mark. And it's like, people are not aware that if you're disabled, you got an absolute right of way, even if you're going against a red light, they need to stop. And if they don't stop, there's strict liability when you get killed. But anyway, it's a very difficult place to cross because you have to start sneaking out a little bit to get their attention that I would like to cross, but shit, anyway. I shouldn't have put that on the record. Remove that.
Right,
We won't type it, it'll just be recorded. It's even the recordings.
Anyway,
So, are you
it's-
making a motion?
I move to approve this letter as drafted.
A second.
Oh.
All right, well, any further discussion? All in favor?
And thank you, Nikki, for putting it together.
Oh, yeah, Melinda put the letter together. I just
Okay.
kind of made it pretty and put Constance's name on there, so I won't take the credit.
All right, motion approved. Approval of minutes from November 14th. Any questions? Any comments, Mark?
Well, first of all, we're looking at a set of minutes that's dated September 12th.
Oh.
At the top. So are we looking at the right minutes?
I might have put the wrong minutes in. I'm sorry, you guys. Did I?
Well, the worst
Let me see,
the worst
did I-
thing is I don't remember what we discussed in November versus September.
No, this is September. I'm sorry. I grabbed the wrong one. I apologize.
Postpone review of
Well,
minutes.
Do you wanna, do you wanna move the minutes?
I have December 12th here.
That's what we
No,
had
that's the
earlier.
agenda. That's today's agenda.
Yeah, I just moved to move it to the next.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, they were
I
sent
did-
to you, but
I
I
did.
printed them out trying to be nice.
Yeah, and I didn't have.
And I
The confusion.
apparently was not thinking.
Constance, are you looking at a copy of the 14th?
I did read them and I did not see anything that caught my eye.
You wanna
That,
move to approve?
Mark has already got a word or two
You got like
I
a
didn't
misspelling
get to
or.
read them, but
that.
I'm sorry.
So postpone to the next meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. We can postpone it until January if you wanna do that. I mean, that might be better, so you're actually looking at it.
Yes.
Mm.
Okay, hold on a second.
Do we have a second? I'll second. Okay.
all right, and any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Awesome.
Doing that.
So future agenda items, we agreed to move discussion B and active agenda A to next month. And approval of minutes.
I have one, actually. I kind of coordinated for January. Hannah had sent me an email about public transportation and CDBG funds. And so I kind of coordinated with Melinda, our grant, manager, and transit to maybe come speak on public transportation and CDBG. And if they can correlate, or how would that work? Because CDBG, you have to make a request for the funds, and I think it opens in February. So I had kind of already planned to put that on January, if you guys are. Okay.
It ties into Eric Peterson.
Mhm.
It ties into something that's happening and I've been brought into at a federal level. And that's going to be dramatic changes, but will probably affect our property taxes locally. On the federal government dealing with Medicaid and CDBG funding. And they're targeted. Big time. So I actually have some materials I could send to you to send out to the members that gives pretty good background on very probable federal actions and how it's going to affect us at the state level. And anything that affects us at the state level is going to affect us at the local level. Just to kind of bring awareness.
Okay.
Is that okay if I do that, Chris? Yeah, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other future agenda items? Commissioner comments?
Eric Peterson,
Eric?
I just want to say I've dealt with Dustin for quite a few years on many things. And I love his honesty. And I love his ability to get things done. And pretty much not overpromise, but make it plain he's making the efforts. So I just give kudos to he and his department for how they've been doing things. And I think it's helping our reputation actually for the whole city. Done.
That's great. Any staff liaison comments?
I don't have anything.
All right. Let's adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.